I'm Chris.
I'm Billy.
And we're here for a series called Christian Essentials, and we're looking at the Psalms.
Specifically, we're going to look at how to use the Psalms to enrich our prayer life. So join in on the conversation. So we're continuing our conversation about praying the Psalms. We've looked at Psalms of Orientation, of disorientation, and now we're going to be looking at Psalms of Reorientation. What does that mean, Chris?
So to reorient means that there was a time where you were oriented, where things were going well, where you could say, my feet, everything's great and wonderful. And then you've experienced a moment where where everything's hit the fan and things are terrible and it's as bad as it's ever been. And now reorientation is to say, I was in this bad place and now I'm back. I made it, things were bad, but now they're good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's plenty of great language from the psalmists throughout the scriptures that essentially use their experience to testify to what God has done, can do, and will do. So this Psalms of Reorientation, just help us look back upon our past and not treat it as something that we need to completely negate or let go of, or completely just write out from our history, which I think there's a temptation to try and just get rid of our past and pretend like it isn't a part of our story. The beautiful thing about the gospel, the beautiful thing about the narrative of faith, is that God uses our past to give us a testimony. That God uses our past to help us show the glory and the love of God to other people as we see the glory and love of God more through reflecting on it,
Yeah, so this, even if you don't know the Psalms of Reorientation, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved the wretch like me. That's a song of reorientation. It's a recognition that there was a time where I was in a wretched state or in a wretched place. I was lost, but now I'm found. That's a psalm of reorientation because it's not saying that I've never been lost and everything's wonderful. It's not a psalm of innocence. It's the kind of psalm you can sing on the other side of college or on the other side of a very difficult moment where you've experienced a breakup or you've experienced a failure. And on the other side of that, you realize you wake up the next day and there's new mercy, there's new grace. And you haven't died, and you're still there, and slowly God's grace creates something new. And when that happens, you can pray a psalm of gratitude. And I think that's the Psalms. The Psalms of Reorientation are all about, what God has done for us through disorientation.
Yeah. We're going to read just a brief example of Psalm of Orientation. Psalm 40. Verses 1 through 3. I was joking before we were filming. This is a great U2 song as well. So if you like music, check that out. But Psalm 40 verses 1 through 3 say, I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry. He drew me up from the desolate pit, out of the miry bog, and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. Beautiful, beautiful section of Psalm 40. It goes on for about 17 verses, just talking about the psalmist's experience of pain. We talked about when we were talking about disorientation of that we don't pray to neglect our pain, but rather to acknowledge it so that we may find meaning in it. In the midst of this, in the midst of praying Psalms of Reorientation, we could start with the internal part of it all, taking it to God and recognizing, oh, wow, you really were at work at this part of my life, even though I could not see you at all, right? I look back now and I see where you were at work, even if at that moment I was wondering where you were. So there's an internal beauty to that of growing in our love and our trust of God, but it's also externalized, this method that we briefly mentioned before. It gives you a testimony. And it helps you realize, and this is really big when it comes to discerning calling and envying other people's journeys and lives, your story, your testimony makes it to where only you can speak to some people. Mm-hmm. There are some people that only you are most equipped to connect to God.
Yeah, this is what you see celebrated in rooms of recovery,
Yeah.
of AA and NA. That's that's a community of reorientation.
Yeah.
And so what you have are testimonies of reorientation. I think a testimony of, or kind of a story that you can share of how God has brought you out of the miry bog, out of the pit. It first can be actually a prayer that you offer to God. It's saying, God, I was in that place waiting for you, and you didn't forget me.
Mm-hmm.
I was lost, and I couldn't find my way out, and you came and found me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a sense of affirming the character and the goodness of God in that.
Yeah.
A God, this time not of creation, but of redemption or deliverance or rescue or salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And I like what you said, that when you go through those experiences, part of the reason not to shy away from it, but to not only pray it, but offer it to others, is that I don't know. People aren't drawn to heroes of spirituality, of like people that have it all together. That's hard to enter into because that's not our experience. We know that. Mm-hmm. It's not most people's experience. It might not be your experience. But a person who's experienced waiting for God in the miry bog or in the desert or in the wilderness or whatever, who comes out of that and is able to speak to it, can display a kind of trust on the other side.
So what does this mean for you? We'll put some Psalms of Reorientation. I encourage you to engage Psalm 40. We'll put a couple other examples in the description of this video, but I encourage you, and not just if you're fully healed from something, not just if you really are on the other side, but maybe you're still healing, right? Maybe you're not in the pit that you were once in, but you still wake up some days and it's a little hard to breathe when you're thinking of that trauma, when you're thinking of that lost relationship, when you're thinking of whatever that pain may be. Psalms of Reorientation can help you continue on the journey of healing if you're still in that process. So
I've heard it. I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
And I think that I've heard it talked about in the vein of music. There's some songs that are expression, and when you sing them, you're expressing how you feel in that moment. Mm-hmm. And some of them are it's formation. It's language that might be stored up for you, even if that's not where you're experiencing in that day. You take on language that forms you in a particular way of prayer. And I think, certain moments of my life, I'm praying Psalms of Reorientation in moments of disorientation, or Psalms of Disorientation in moments of reorientation. Yeah. And I think that's okay, because it's giving you a pattern of prayer, which is the pattern of life. I mean, this is the spiritual life. It's orientation, disorientation, reorientation, orientation, disorientation, reorientation. It happens over and over again. And that's the life of faith.
Yeah, absolutely. We hope this has been helpful. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. You can reach out to either one of us if you know us, direct message our accounts, or any way that we can help you engage the Psalms and to let them bring new life to your prayer life. Because that's the whole point here, right? Is to use the language of the Psalms, this inherited language through the scriptures from the church, to have an on-ramp into prayer. Because we all know that we need to pray, but sometimes we don't know how to do it. And you know what?
Psalms.
That's okay.
Just
start here, Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope that this has been helpful, and we'll see you for our next edition of Christian Essentials.